Hey, hello, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Tobias, and on my channel I simply talk about music. And it's high time for me to do yet another retrospective of 1984. These are the episodes that I do for each month, celebrating the wonderful music year that was 1984. We had so many new artists coming through, great albums, and of course great singles. It was just such a stellar year for music in my book. So I wanted to celebrate that. It's been 40 years since then. Can't believe it myself. 40 years. Wow. Yeah, so if you never watched one of these retrospectives with me, I'm just going to give you a quick summary. I grew up in Sweden. And as a 12-year-old back in 1984, at least at this point, I was 12 years old. I hadn't turned 13 yet. I was obsessed with music, and my go-to place for new music was the radio, and the most popular program when it came to music was called Poporama. Yeah, Poporama, it was our program. We as listeners were in control of this show because, like I said, it was on every week. We got played a bunch of new singles, some tracks that already charted from previous weeks. But after each episode, we could sit down, write down our top 5 favorite tracks from that week on a postcard or a letter and send them off to Swedish radio. They would count the votes during the week, and that would be the basis of next week's Poporama charts, and so forth and so on. So yeah, we were in control. No selling charts here, even if there are correlations, of course, because what is popular is also going to sell. And starting out doing these retrospectives, I started doing that by basing it on the Swedish single charts from back in the day. But then I started thinking, where did I actually get my new music from? What was the basis for all these mixtapes that I taped back then? And it was, of course, Poporama. So I changed that from episode 3, I think it was. So yeah, and what I'm going through each of these episodes is the last transmitted Poporama chart from each respective month. So in this case, I'm going to base it on the 28th of June of 1984. But I'm also going to pick some other tracks that were being played on Poporama during June of 1984. Because there is always those odd tracks that never really got enough votes. They were only played once, but they hold a special place in my heart. Either they grabbed me back then in 1984, or it's something I just learned to appreciate along the road, along the years, so to speak. So yeah, honorable mentions, we can call them. And at the end of each episode, I also do some honorable mentions from the UK charts, and those are also tracks that holds a special place in my heart. But they are tracks that never were being played on Poporama. They never charted in the Poporama charts because we did have a lot of UK releases that never found their way to the Swedish shores, so to speak. But now it's high time for me to kick things off here. We left June way behind us now, so let's look what was on the Poporama charts of June of 1984. And the first new single being played on this Poporama chart of the 28th of June 1984 was The Style Council and You're the Best Thing. It could be discontent, chase the rainbow's end. A really great single, but at the time it didn't really grab me. I can't remember having this on any mixtape at all. I learned to appreciate The Style Council further down the road in the 1980s. It was part of what would become sophistopop, a genre that just popped up during the 1980s. Think Sade's Smooth Operator, for example, and further down the line you got the Swing Out Sisters with Breakout, the Blow Monkeys, for example. All of that was like sophistopop, more polished kind of pop. really stupid in my book, really. I'm not a big genre guy. I call most music pop music or rock music. I make things really simple for myself, but this one was part of sophisticated pop. And the style council, of course, was Paul Weller, formerly known from the Jam, singer. And then we had Mike Talbot on keyboards, Steve White on drums, if I'm not misremembering things. And this was the beginnings. I think this was the first single. I could be wrong. But at least it was taken from their debut album, Café Bleu, which is a great, great album. But like I said, at the time, it didn't grab me. Didn't end up any mixtapes or anything like that. So it only stayed, sadly, for 1 week. It was only played on this show. And the same goes for the next single, which really, really surprises me when I read this, because to my recollection, this was a huge, huge track with us kids or teenagers. This is Twisted Sister and We're Not Gonna Take It.
We're right, yeah, we're free, yeah, we'll fight, yeah, you'll see.
We're Not Gonna Take It, Twisted Sister, of course. And as I said, I was really surprised by this one, but I can only go by the statistics here. Only been played once, spent 1 week on the Poporama charts. And the surprising thing in that is, because to my recollection, this was a big, big hit. And it could be that it spent more time on the selling charts, really, on the single charts in Sweden. But yeah, really surprised about this one, because they did have 2 singles out in 1984 that was big, at least to my recollection. And it was this one and another one called I Wanna Rock. And I think the big success behind these ones, at least in Sweden, was due to the videos that were shown on television at some point. Where in this one, We're Not Gonna Take It, you have the father who is trying to straight out his son, who only wants to play the guitar and rock.
What do you want to do with your life? I want to rock.
And then you had the second one, which I think was called I Wanna Rock, with Twisted Sister as well. That was played out in a school of some sort, and the tyrannical teacher in that one is played by the same actor as in this one, who's played the father in We're Not Gonna Take It. And it was hilarious videos back then. We thought they were really funny. I wasn't too keen on music, as I talked about here before. I wasn't that into rock music really, but those 2 videos we really thought were hilarious. And I can't remember if we mentioned Twisted Sister here before and I Wanna Rock, because if I'm not misremembering things, I Wanna Rock came before We're Not Gonna Take It, but perhaps they were switched around when it comes to releases in Sweden. Who knows? But yeah, a baffling one. Just 1 week for We're Not Gonna Take It on the Swedish Poporama charts. But now let's move on to the next one, which actually stayed for 3 weeks, and this one is an important single for me. This is Frankie Goes to Hollywood and 2 Tribes. Frankie Goes to Hollywood with 2 Tribes. And yeah, boy, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, they are responsible for me starting collecting records. They were the basis for this record collection, still going on today. And it was with this single, 2 Tribes, indeed. They have been releasing their debut single in the previous year, in 1983, and that was, of course, Relax. But that one didn't really grab me at the time. I thought it was okay track, but when this one was released, my mind was blown. But my mind wasn't blown on the 28th of June when this one was first aired on Poporama. And like I said, it stayed for 3 weeks, but I thought it was a good single. But what really blew my mind was a taping that I saw from the Top of the Pops with Frankie performing 2 Tribes. But that is going to be a part of a special that I'm preparing at the moment. It's all about how one VHS tape actually changed my music listening in 1984, and it was mind-blowing. So stick around for that one. And of course I have this in my collection along with several other remixes of said track, but I think this one, the original 12-inch, is still my favorite. And this is actually the copy, the first one that I picked up from Frank Goes to Hollywood back in 1984. And as you can see, it's a bit worn. The vinyl inside, it shows signs of wear. It's been on a lot of turntables throughout the years, but it's still here in my collection. And what a single this is, Two Tribes. But like I said, more about that in my special coming up. Now on to the next new single that we're being played on this Poporama chart, and it's a Swedish group called Docent Död, and the single is called Sjunde himlen. This is one where I couldn't really find a sound snippet from this single, weirdly enough, because I know Docent Död, or Docenterna as they were known for at a later point, were really big in Sweden. They had a big hit during the 80s as well. I think it was 1982, if I'm not mistaken, with Bakom mina solglasögon, which roughly translates behind my sunglasses, which was a huge hit. They started out like a punk rock band, but I think they went more into the new wave sort of thing at this point in time. So I can't really say that I remember this one from back in the day, and not been able to hear it either. I can't recollect and give my thoughts on it today either. I only spent 1 week, only get played at this point in time on the 28th of June in 1984 on Poporama. So let's move on to the next single.
L'amour est en Provence, à Saint-Paul-de-Vence.
This is Annica Boller and Saint Paul de Vence. Saint Paul de Vence. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And the same goes for Annica's surname, Boller. It's not very Swedish, is it? So I was a bit curious, but because there were some things in this production that tingled my spidey senses, so to speak. So I looked it up and I put it down in this book. This is my trusted 1984 notebook that I carry with each of these episodes to give you some interesting facts, and interesting facts for me as well. It wasn't surprising that some of my spidey senses were tingling when listening to this one, because it is produced by Secret Service. I thought I heard something familiar in this one, and Secret Service, they are certainly known to me. One of the great Swedish bands from the 1980s. But for some reason, I didn't really recognize this name, Annica Boller. So we could read in this book as well that she was between 1979 and 1980 a singer in a Swedish group called Rock Deluxe. Doesn't ring a bell either, but what does ring a bell is her boyfriend at the time, and that was apparently Ted Gärdestad, a very famous Swedish singer. And she also performed in 1980 a song in the Swedish Melodifestivalen, which is where we select which song we're going to send to Eurovision. And that song was called Låt solen värma dig, and I can't remember that one either, I'm sorry. But there were some tidbits about Annica Boller. I learned something new, and perhaps you did too. But let's now move on to the next one. And this one is one that I couldn't find any information about. And it's Janne Andersson, I flickors fall. And sometimes we do come across these ones where you can't really find any information at all about the artist, you can't remember the song. So let's just say it stayed for 1 week. It was only played on this show, basically. And the same, by the way, goes for Annica's song as well. Sadly, it only stayed for 1 week on the Poporama chart. The next new single, however, I'm very familiar with, and this is The Smiths.
What she asked of me at the end of the day, Caligula would have blushed.
Heaven knows I'm missable now. What a great pop single from the Smiths. But back then in 1984, I had no clue who the Smiths were. I can't remember having them on any mixtapes. I think it was in late 1986 where I discovered the greatness of the Smiths. But it was very short-lived. And I would pick it up way later in the years, but that's a story for another time. I just have to conclude this is one of the greatest singles in my book. Heaven knows I'm miserable now. What a great title to begin with, and what a great pop song with the Johnny Marr's riffs and the lyrics by Morrissey. It's just an outstanding single. But sadly, only stayed for 1 week. We only played once on the Poporama shots. We weren't ready for the Smiths in Sweden at this point in time. So let's move on to the next one. And this one is one that really grabbed my attention back then. It could be the one that really kicked me off listening to more and even more Italo disco. This is Fun Fun. And this is certainly fun. This is one of my most cherished tracks from 1984. I remember I was hooked on this one, Color My Love. And like I said, this was also one of many stepping stones into the wonderful world of Italo disco. And once again, I need to go back to my notebook here so I pronounce the names right. The vocalists in this group was, of course, Ivana Spagna, that we would see doing some solo things later on in the 80s, but at this point in time she was one part of Fun Fun. So we have Ivana Spagna there and Antonella Pepe as well. But for some reason the producers of this track didn't think that they could actually front the group Fun Fun. So whenever we see any TV performances from back then with Fun Fun, it's not these two wonderful ladies. No, it's some models probably skipping around miming to the songs. And that's a shame. And I think that that's why later on, I think in 1984 as well, Ivana Spagna left the group to pursue a solo career as well. She got a bit fed up not being actually put in the limelight, so to speak. But still today, this is one of my favorite tracks from Fun Fun. I do remember having this one on a single. It could still be back in Sweden because I have a storage back in Sweden with a lot of my vinyl records. So I will go back to Sweden later on this year. So hopefully I'll bring back some of my Italo records. But for now, I just can show you this one. This is, of course, a re-release of the greatest hits and remixes from Syx Records. And the track, of course, is on here as well as a club mix, a 7-minute club mix. It's up here somewhere. And there's no pictures of the girls here either. But it's... if you're gonna get into Fun Fun, this is a good way to start things with their greatest hits and remixes. And you can get this one on a CD as well. There's some more tracks on that one. But yeah, what a great group. And to my delight, I can tell you that this track stayed for 5 weeks on the Poporama charts. And they do deserve it. One of the outstanding dance tracks from 1984. Color My Love, Fun Fun. The next new single to be played on this Poporama show was Neaston's Queen of Soul, Mary Wilson.
The truth makes love last longer. Two lies make my love stronger. Ain't that peculiar?
Yeah, at the time this one was played, it probably just went right over my head, sadly, because it is a great pop song, I think, now listening back to it. But it wasn't really in my wheelhouse at the time, probably. I became aware of Mary Wilson years later, actually, and just in the last couple of years I listened to more Mary Wilson, and that's thanks to a label she was on called the Compact Organization, and one particular artist that caught my ear just a couple of years ago called Virna Lindt. She's a Swedish artist where I'm going to come back to her in a special episode here on my channel. But yeah, like I said, they were both on the same label. And when it comes to both Virna Lindt and Mary Wilson, they had a love for everything 60s, really. You know, Mary Wilson with her big hairdo, that beehive as it was. There was a lot of cover songs that she did from the 60s as well, and this one, Ain't It Peculiar, is another cover song as well. I think it's been recorded by several artists, but the one that comes to my mind is Marvin Gaye. I think it was written among others by Smokey Robinson, and this is a very 80s take on this song, but I think it's a brilliant productions. Todd Taylor, if I'm not misremembering names here, was the name of the producer and the guy who actually owned the record label, the Compact Organization. It's a very interesting story, the Compact Organization, and certainly the story about Mary Wilson and Virna Lindt and all the other artists on that one. So, like I said, I'm going to do a special not only on Virna Lindt but on the Compact Organization itself. So yeah, but at the time it went right over my head, right over the head for the rest of the Poporama listeners as well, because it's only spent 1 week and only got played once on Poporama, and that's a bit of a shame, to be honest. But that's just me today reflecting on this. My 12-year-old self would say, nah, there's nothing for me. So yeah, let's move along, and we're now going to move into the main list of Poporama. This is not the new singles, these are singles that already charted from previous weeks, and we're going to start out with Spandau Ballet.
How many hearts must you break? Well, how many cars must I make?
On the number 6 spot on this Poporama list, we heard Spandau Ballet and Only When You Leave. And let me tell you, that was a welcome listening. I haven't heard this one for years and years. For some reason, it was a big hit back then. It spent 3 weeks on the Poporama charts, for example. And I know for a fact it was a big hit all over Europe, at least. But yeah, for some reason, when you listen back to some compilations or playlists, the best of the 80s or whatever they were being called, and Spandau Ballet pops up. It's usually Gold or Through the Barricades or something like that pops up. But to me, I haven't heard this one for years, Only When You Leave. So yeah, really welcome listening. Loved this track back in the day. Had it on a compilation cassette, not a mixtape, a proper bought compilation on a cassette. One of my favorite cassettes that I was listening a lot to in 1984. And this was one of my standout tracks from that one. A very slick production, of course. They always had slick productions, Spandau Ballet, but it's just seemed that they every production just became slicker and slicker, right? But yeah, this is a top-notch 80s production behind this one, and good songwriting, a good voice there, of course. All of it is just great. I think it still holds up really well today. So yeah, very welcome listening there for me. But we won't stay too long with that one. Let's move on to the number 5 spot, and we'll find someone familiar as well. The Pointer Sisters and Jump for My Love. Great synthesizers going on in this track, and I have a hard time assessing this track in 2024 because it's one of those Pointer Sisters tracks that I've heard so much from. It's just been overplayed, really, in my book. Just like I said with Spandau Ballet, if you ever hear a Pointer Sister track, it always seems to be this one. Or the Neutron Dance is another one. Yeah, but never mind. I think this is the biggest hit from that album they released in 1984. And like I say, it was a good track back then, but I have a really hard time assessing it today. I think I would skip this one if I were to put it on today. That's all I can say. But I can say that it stayed for 3 weeks, just like Spandau Ballet on the Poporama list. So now let's go on to the number 4 spot on this Poporama list, and that is a very welcome return of Break Machine, which I discussed, I think it was in my last retrospective, with a brilliant track Street Dance. This time around they'll invite us to a breakdance party.
Just let your body work tonight and dance. We'll party till the morning light.
Yeah, Break Machine, I can't help but love them. This track is of course molded in the same shape as a Street Dance. There is the whistling going on, a bit different whistling, but we still know it's Break Machine that we're listening to. And I know that this one was a huge hit for them in Sweden at the time, a big summer hit, and I remember I loved this track. Not as good as Street Dance, but nearly there. So this is another one I'm surely going to keep an eye out for in the vintage bins going forward. Yeah, like I said, it's very similar to the previous hit Street Dance, but it's different, and still it's such a fun and uplifting track. I can't help but loving it. Yeah, so that's Break Machine and Breakdance Party. And another one that stayed for a very long time on the Poporama charts is the next entry. In number 3 we have a Swedish artist called Niclas Wahlgren, and the song is called Het lång sommarnatt.
Het lång sommarnatt, värm mig och visa att du vill ha mig här hos dig.
A big hit in the summer of 1984, this track with Niclas Wahlgren, which roughly translates to Long Hot Summer Night, very fittingly. And yeah, he was huge this summer of 1984. Remember my sister really liked this track, and certainly a lot of girls in my class as well. And of course it's his good looks. He was a heartthrob and he had a nice voice as well. So I think a lot of girls and certainly boys as well were really mesmerized by this Niclas Wahlgren. And he comes from a big showbiz family in Sweden, the Wahlgrens. His mother, a very famous Swedish actress back in the 60s, and so goes for their father as well, a big named actor. And his sister, Pernilla Wahlgren, is of course very famous in Sweden as well. And I talked about her in my Melodifestival and Eurovision special that I did back in May. And yeah, really big showbiz family. Their children today, I know Pernilla's children is a famous influencer. I'm not that well versed when it comes to Wahlgrens, but influencers. And then you have Benjamin Ingrosso as well, of course, who was sent as one of the entries for Sweden in Eurovision a couple of years ago. So yeah, it's just a big talented family, really, with actors and singers and all that. And Niclas is part of that. And yeah, he was a heartthrob back in 1984. So he stayed for 5 weeks on this list. And why am I mentioning just heartthrob here? I already said he had a great voice, but I think the good looks took him a long way back in 1984. But that's just my opinion, so don't get back to me on that one. Let's move on to the number 2 spot on this Poporama chart, and we know this one. This is Wham!
The gray skies out of my way. You make the sunshine brighter than Doris Day.
Wham! Well, you just have to say it like that because an exclamation point after the group name. Anyhow, Wake Me Up Before You Go, the big springboard, I'd have to say, for Wham. They did release a couple of singles before this one, but this was the big one, Wake Me Up Before You Go. Certainly so in Sweden. This is what drove them to the big stardom and fame they had all over the world. And at the time, I thought it was a good track, not one of my favorite ones. I think, once again, this resonated more with the girls in my class, and certainly my sister was a big Wham fan as well. It was just that good looks once again, because of course both of them looks really good. Both Andrew and George had the looks to them. But if we're just going to talk about the quality of the single, I think it's really, really well-crafted pop single. Even if I didn't think it was one of the best ones back in the day, now listening back to it, of course, it's one of those 80s classics. It's far from one of the best Wham singles out there, but I still enjoy it, I have to say. It's quirky, it's a bit silly, if not very silly, but still a great, great pop song in my book. And I did talk about Wham in one of the episodes last year when I just purchased their latest compilation, because I said at the time, I don't think I have anything with Wham in my collection. I didn't think so, at least. But now, when I have been moving and going through my collection again, lo and behold, I had two 12 inches with Wham. But I think I did purchase them way later in the 80s, and I'm talking really late in the 80s, perhaps even so in 1990, when I already heard the solo albums from George Michael, and I started to appreciate Wham a lot more. So I do have Wake Me Up Before You Go to show you from my collection. This is of course a 12-inch of said track. And I think at the time when I picked this one up was not so much about the song itself, but I really like the cover. When you think of an 80s record cover, this might spring to your mind because it's very, very colorful, but it's a very beautiful sleeve as well, in my book. And it is, of course, and I didn't know that at the time when I picked it up, it's designed by Peter Saville as well, and he was of course the one who did most of the Factory Records covers as well, for the likes of Joy Division, Certain Ratio, New Order, and the list goes on and on and on. He's done things for Peter Gabriel as well. A really talented designer, which I had a privilege to attend a seminar that he did in London a couple of years ago. Really, really interesting. And he talked a lot about Wham and what he did for them, because this is not the only cover he did for Wham. He also did the cover for Make It Big, if I'm not mistaken, but certainly for I'm Your Man, the 12-inch, Edge of Heaven as well. Yeah, there's a lot of them, and it's a beautiful design. But now back to the record. I think the B-side here, you do get an instrumental, which I don't care too much for when it comes to songs overall, but you do get another track called A Ray of Sunshine, and it says here especially recorded for the Tube, and I think that was included on the compilation I bought as well. But it's a great, great track, so if you haven't checked that one out, have a listen to it. I think you will enjoy it. But yeah, that was Wake Me Up Before You Go. Huge, huge single in the summer of 1984 in Sweden. It stayed for 6 weeks in the Poporama charts. So that's Wham. But what was on the #1 spot on this Poporama chart of the 28th of June 1984? Well, that's Chicago. The #1 spot on this Poporama list from June of 1984, Chicago and Stay the Night. Big, big hit for them. It spent 5 weeks on the Poporama chart, so there you go. I do remember I was quite fond of this one when it came out, but it was one of those songs, at least to my recollection, that never ended up on one of my mixtapes. I heard it on the radio, I appreciated it, I saw the video, and the video, by the way, I think today is more interesting than the actual song, but yeah, that's just me. Yeah, and they had a couple of other hits during the 80s, I remember, and the same goes for those. I remember listening to them on the radio, watching the videos, but that was basically it. And I never picked up on Chicago after that. I don't think I ever listened to this one until I did this episode. And it's quite bland to me today. You might think that's funny coming from someone who just praised Fun, for example, which is very much an 80s production. But there's something about this that doesn't really appeal to me, and I can't really pinpoint it. One thing that does appeal to me is the voice of Peter Cetera. I think it's such a great voice, very powerful. Goes right through the mix, right in your face, really. He's got a great voice. And it just dawned on me now, I should have researched this before, but like I said, it's just dawned on me now. Have Pete Cetera been part of this band from the beginning? Really curious about that, because I know the one thing I know about Chicago, they have different formations throughout the years. I think they started in the late 60s, really, and they probably sounded quite different from what we were just listening to now from 1984. It's a very slick 80s production, and I would be very curious if any one of you who are watching this are a Chicago fan or knows anything about them. Please let me down in the comments. Have Pete Cetera always been part of this band? What did they sound like back in the day? I suspect it could be prog rock or something like that. Who knows? But yeah. That's all I have to say really about Chicago. Never been part of my collection, but it was nice to revisiting this one, but doesn't really appeal to me today as much as it did back then. So we'll leave the Poporama charts here for now, for June of 1984, and I'm gonna do one honorable mention from the Poporama charts of 1984, a track that was played earlier that month and still holds a very special place in my heart. This is Matt Bianco and Sneaking Out the Back Door.
From place to place, another town, a different face. You may find me
Sneaking out the back door with a great.
And here it is, the brilliant single from Matt Bianco, Sneaking Out the Back Door. I actually bought this one on a 7-inch way back in 1984. Eventually I upgraded to a 12-inch, which is still here in my collection. And like I said, what a beautiful pop single, but it didn't really jive with the Poporama listeners. Only got played once, sadly. But it stayed with me for a very long time, and I do spin this record quite a lot, even today. The 12-inch is a great one, and it's an extended version, and I always loved the B-side as well on the single called Matt's Mood, and it's an instrumental track which could be placed in a spy thriller from the late 60s or early 70s, and of course upgraded with a drum machine and all of that, but it still got that feel to it, because what they did, Matt Bianco, and I said this before, they took all the influences from bossa nova and jazz and just put them in a blender really, and what came out was brilliant pop records with a very special twist to them. Yeah, I love Matt Bianco still today. And they were going to release more singles in 1984 and then in 1985 as well, so we have a reason to come back to that. The lyrics, by the way, to this one is really interesting. It's all about, it's like a spy thriller really. It's about double play and all the other mischiefs that goes along with that. Very nicely done, the lyrics for this one. And you know, back in the day, 1984, I wasn't that well versed in English. I'm still not. There's a lot of Swinglish going on here. Yeah, for some pop songs it was just nonsense lyrics, and I know that, but I've always been one who got hooked more on melodies and things like that. But certain artists, they have some interesting lyrics and you try to pick up on them, and some of them get misheard along the way. And this is one of them. They sing in the chorus, for example, sneaking out the back door with a grin. But I always heard it as sneaking out the back door with the green. It doesn't make sense at all. I was like, green, is that the neighbor or some bloke that they were sneaking out the back door with? But no, of course it was a grin. I learned that later on when I bought the album, which came with a lyric sheet. Yeah, but it's a funny one, or perhaps not. I don't know. Anyhow, perhaps I will do a special just around misheard lyrics throughout the years, because there's been many of them, and some of them are right out funny. Yeah, that was Matt Bianco and Sneaking Out the Back Door with a grin. To round things off, we're now gonna look at the honorable mentions from the UK chart of June of 1984. And this time around, I only managed to find 2 releases, actually, but it's 2 very important releases to me because they hold a very, very special place in my heart. And first out is the brilliant Scritti Politti and the track Absolute. And this is such a great single from Scritti Politti. What a follow-up to Would Be that we already talked about here on my retrospectives. I would dare to say this is a smidge better than Would Be, and Would Be in my book is outstanding. It's such a brilliant pop single, so you can just imagine how good Absolute is then. No, it's really, really good, and this is of course a 12-inch I'm holding in my hand, and it features a remix of said track by Gary Langan of Art of Noise fame, and it's a brilliant, brilliant mix. Can highly recommend this one. And this is just a sign of things to come, really, because in the following year, in 1985, we're going to get the album that's just right behind me, Cupid and Psyche 85, and that is an outstanding album, still in heavy rotation in this house. And yeah, this is no exception at all. And just like Would Be, I could talk about the lyrics for this one for probably an hour. It's very interesting, but I won't do that here today. I'm just going to mention the title of this one is, of course, Absolute. And one of the lines in this song is, where the words are vodka clear, forgetfulness has brought us near to love. So is this a love song to a girl, a boy, or a particular brand of Swedish spirits? Who knows? Who knows? Yeah, it's very, very interesting. And I can't say at the time in 1984, I was actually dissecting the lyrics. I just loved the song, the melody of it. It's just over the years I start really dissecting some of the words in Scritti Politti's lyrics. And they're pretty interesting. And Absolute is no exception at all. This one, by the way, spent 11 weeks on the UK charts and peaked at number 17, but unfortunately not in Sweden on the Poporama list. The next single out is from that VHS tape that I mentioned in my intro to this episode that I'm going to do a special on. One of the discoveries from that VHS tape was a performance from an American group called Windjammer and the track Tossin' and Turnin'. Here it is, Tossin' and Turnin'. I wasn't aware of Windjammer at the time, and to date, this is the only thing I ever heard from Windjammer. I know that they released 3 albums at least, but that was over the span of from 83 to 85, and then they more or less disappeared, to my knowledge at least. Perhaps some of you out there know more about Windjammer, but this specific track, Tossin' and Turnin', was featured on that Top of the Pops that was on this mythical VHS tape that I'm talking about. And I was mesmerized. It's a bit of a soul pop record really, and I wasn't really into that genre at the time, but there was something with the melody and the way, I think his name is Carl Dennis who's singing this, the way he delivered it, it was just outstanding. Even if at the time on that Top of the Pops show I thought he looked a bit quirky, a bit quirky, let's say that, the singer with his dance moves and all of that, but it doesn't matter. It's a brilliant song. And this, of course, is the 12-inch. I didn't pick it up at the time. This is a recent purchase that I did, I think a year ago now, where I found this. I never seen a Windjammer album or 12-inch for that matter in any secondhand shop I've been into. So I was very pleased to find this one. It's a treasure for sure. So you get Tossin' and Turnin' on the A side. It's a longer version. I suspect it would be the album version. It's not like a remix or anything like that. And then the B side, Dive Inside My Love, is also a beautiful track. But the standout, of course, is Tossin' and Turnin'. So yeah, great track. And that one spent 14 weeks in the UK charts, peaking at number 18. Two great singles there from the UK charts, and that concludes the honorable mentions. I want to thank you so much for being part of yet another episode here on my channel. Thank you so much for watching this. And if you really do like what you're watching, please consider giving a thumbs up. I would love that. But what I would really love is for you to put some comments down in the comment sections about some of your favorite tracks from 1984. It doesn't have to be from June of 1984. Any track would do. And if you do have something to say about some of the tracks and artists that I'm talking about today, please do so. Correct me if I was wrong on anything. Do enlighten me with some more information about these artists and the tracks. And if you really like what I'm doing, and that would help me immensely for my small channel, please consider subscribing as well. Yeah. But that's it. Until next time, folks, have a good one. Take care of yourself. And as usual, I bid you adieu.